Previously on Drone Wars.
How do we make this just terrifying and effective at the same time? How they came up with it's like a drone that spews fire. And then the other day I saw a drone that washes the outside of boats. One is a military application, the other one is a commercial application. And it's only the ingenuity of the people that came up with it is the limit on what you can do, right?
Don't use Ukraine for a proving ground just to turn around and win a contract in the DoD. If you're going to be out here, use the technology, like one, make it affordable, and two, make it accessible to the end users who have the no shit problem.
This is Dan Meiji, host of the Drone Wars podcast, where we talk about all things autonomous. And this week we're joined by James Acuna, who's calling in from Eastern Europe, where he's running the Baltic Ghostwing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like the cat and mouse, and this is my personal opinion, right? Like the RF stuff is going to get incredibly tricky. One, because they can move between signals. Two, because they're now changing waveforms, right? So they're not, now you're not showing up in your library, even if you have some sort of AI element to your detection algorithm. And then you're starting to see stuff like, I mean, you know, the terminal guidance is the first step. And I think the computer vision stuff's maybe a ways away, in my opinion. But there's a lot of other ways to move stuff around, and they're also showing up in places we wouldn't see. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and in heaven forbid, the RF link goes away. You know, like you only need RF links if you have a human pilot that is flying your unmanned system. If you don't, and you have that AI bot or somebody is flying that, like it, and you've given it kinetic control, like the ability to do direct fires or something, you're not jamming anything because that doesn't exist, right? You can still go after the GPS signals and things like that, but you know that's so 2022. Like you see alternative navigation systems that are like revolutionary, like things I wouldn't even think of. And then you see things that like INS, right, which old missiles used to use, because they just spin and they try to count where they are. And so this is the ingenuity of in my opinion, the Ukrainians on the ground. Like they go back to brass tacks. They're super like garage guys. You know, they can make anything out of like things they find in their garage. And it really, and I think the consternation that I have a little bit is that the West doesn't take more note of what they're doing.
And how should they do that, James? Tell us, like, give us some, you know, you're the doctor, give us a prescription. What do we need to do better to understand just how advanced they are and how this war is being fought fundamentally differently from anything we've ever seen?
I mean, I think you need to create, like, in terms of like, how do you go west, right? Like my biggest fear is these TTPs and what the Russians, backed up by North Korea and China, is learning goes to their training in Russia, in China, and North Korea. And so how do you ensure that the lessons learned, which were learned with lessons written in blood, how do you ensure that those go to the West? And you know what you do? You set up a Vienna, Austria, right? Like this neutral place in the middle that, you know, the West can come to and Ukraine can come to. And in this case, it's called Eastern Europe. And so let's open up the channel where the Ukrainians have some hope after the war too, that they can take their tech, that they can take some of their TTPs, what they've learned, they can open up a shop. If they want to go work for like large mapping commercial drone companies, like I'll hire them because they're the best pilots in the world. But like, let's create that bridge between the East and the West, so to speak. I'm a little cliche-ish here, but like, let's create that bridge and let's create the opportunity where there's more visibility by the Ukrainian companies to Western companies, not only Western companies, not only DoD, which, does some of that, but how about venture capital guys? How about private equity? How about the people that can fund these guys without all the BS politics or the propaganda or the what you think you know about Ukraine? Because I guarantee what you think you know, and this is just writ large, not you personally, what you think you know is often wrong because you're just not keeping up with it. And you as the collective us, right, as American whoever. You're just not keeping up with it. You don't speak Ukrainian and Russian. You don't read Telegram every day. It's just like it's a full-time job. And so, let other people set up those bridges. Can you imagine if some of these really smart engineers kind of showed up at Stanford and they just had a lunch with some people, or they sat around in Fort Liberty in, North Carolina and talked to some of the operators there about how they were doing it. I think the way that we perceive small class 1 drones, at least, would be completely different if that's the case. And the other thing that I've seen, and we were talking earlier about these drone racing leagues that, if you see drone racing leagues, and the military has gotten into that as well, there's sort of a personification of the people that fly racer drones. And it's like kids and kind of nerdy, geeky people. But when you go to Ukraine and you see the personification of drone pilots, and I would encourage anybody that wants to go walk a street in Kiev and see the ads for the drone brigades. It's like special operations, muscles, skeletons, like mean, badass stuff. And like that, they got it right. That's what it needs to be. And if you're able to get that right and encourage this whole group of people to come and join your drone fight club or your little cadre of drone operators, like to instill that professionalism, just like we did with special operations many years ago. Like that would be cool. That would be awesome. I don't see it yet, but I hope it comes.
You've seen you obviously have. Ukraine gave a Hero of the Republic medal to a drone pilot who'd, I think in a 6-month period, killed like 400 Russians, blew up.
I saw how many people showed up for it, which was like beyond amazing.
It's incredible, right?
Yeah. And, Ukraine's doing that. They've created an unmanned systems command. I think it's run by a colonel. And so they are doing all the right things. And, you never expect, you don't want Ukraine to be the scribe, right? And sit there and say, here are all the lessons we had, because they're fighting a war. And so how do we latch on to those lessons? How do we become the scribes for them and then help build those bridges? Because they're going to need all of it one day when this war ends.
Yeah. What do you think? So you're king for a day, right? You are helping to, let's say, discourage the Chinese from doing something in the Taiwan Strait, right? How do you use drones, or how do you think they might use drones based on what you're seeing in Eastern Europe today?
So for the defense of Taiwan, for example?
Defense of Taiwan, yep.
I don't get a lot of opportunities to comment on the bigger drones. So, the MQ-9s of the world, the $30 million drones. And so, like, I think, like, I'm more class 2, class 1, but I'll be able to answer this question in terms of that. Is if somebody asked me what kind of drones you needed to defend a place like Taiwan, my answer would be yes. Yes. Do you need class 1? Like the little drones, the ISR, the FPV? Yes. Class 2, mid-range FPV, mid-range ISR, longer battery life? Yes. Do you need the longer ISR, D5 ISR now, right? These bigger, longer drones? Yes, you need all that stuff. And it's just like when you look at the counter UAS, how do you defeat these things? You have this layered approach. And so I think your layers, Dan, in that defense starts with $300 FPVs and ISR drones, whether they're, obviously they're not going to be DJI in that case, but like, whatever the acceptable other solution to those ISR drones are, you need that. You need that as a layer. You need those trained operators to, a lot of people have the cadre to fly the big drones, the class 3 or whatever we call it, class 4 and 5. But they don't have the professional cadres to fly the smaller drones. And so as you're developing the technology, again, $1 million a year, $1 million a month, I don't know what the magic number would be, but the answer is yes. Do you need it? Yes. I think even President Zelensky in Ukraine, when they did this Army of Drones program and the drone coalition, the amount that they wanted, which is $1 million a year, I think that will turn out to be not enough.
Yeah,
And
I've heard the numbers now being ramped up to 2 million a year.
And I think it went up to like 1.3 billion in financing, and it's euros over 2 years. Like, that is a huge number. And so to answer your question for Taiwan or whoever, yes. Do they need the inner modularity of this? In other words, the UAVs launching off USV? Yes. UUV? Yes. It's everything, and especially because it's a maritime environment. Yes, you need it. You need it. And you know what? You can go out and invest in, this 2 million Class 1 drones for Ukraine, which I said was what, 1.3 billion? How much is a B2? Right. So let's put that in perspective for a second. Which one do you think has more of a tactical play on the battlefield? Is it a B2 strategic bomber, or is it 2 million drones?
I mean, you probably saw Elon Musk's tweet that's just all over the internet about why you shouldn't buy an F-35. You should be buying 10,000 or 100,000 drones, right? I mean,
and I did comment on that. Not to.
What did you say? I must have
like, that's I guess in Russian language it'd be like baton, later, right? Like, look, I think if you places like Tesla, Starlink, but they look at things from just a purely technological point of view, and I don't think you can fight a war from just a purely technological point of view. So if you look at the F-35 right now, like, AI is good, emerging for unmanned systems, but it's not there. I still want that pilot. PSYOPs, psychological operations, it's emerging for drones. If you've seen some of these X-wing type, these X-class, drones, they just are the meanest shrieker drones you've ever seen in your life. But I've also seen an F-35 or F-22 fly, and I am still definitely afraid of that F-35. And so air superiority, the ability to carry a wide variety of munitions that are going to work. Drones one day will be there. Drones have been around 30 years. Manned aircraft been around over 100. It's going to take a little while to catch up to that. And I think there's still a 6th generation iteration of manned aircraft. I saw the Su-57 in China the other day, and I was in awe of what that plane could do, right? And I'm sure the F-22 is quite as capable. So you're getting there, but you're not there. And I think it's short-sighted to say, we'll just get rid of all the F-35s out there. I think if you combine them, you make a very powerful Air Force. You have the unmanned and you have the manned.
Drone Wars is recorded from Firestorm's global HQ in San Diego. From our custom-built studio inside one of our hero products, a modular industrial-grade manufacturing facility designed to be deployed anywhere in the world within 24 hours for on-demand drone production. Each week on the podcast, we bring you cutting-edge insights from top industry leaders, sharing the breakthroughs and technologies they're working on, the hard lessons they've learned, and bold predictions that they have for the next 5 to 10 years in autonomous systems and advanced manufacturing. Enjoying the show so far? Then be sure you like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Now, back to the show.
Okay, let's switch gears for a second here, right? Tell us about what your day-to-day looks like. Tell us about your Top Gun school. That's what I'm going to call it, okay?
Yeah, thank you. So I don't know if we said it, but I'm actually based here I'm in Tallinn, Estonia right now. And we're based in Estonia. And again, no secret. Since 2022, we've done a lot of consulting for different kinds of drone companies, whether they come from the West or they go from the East. And, I've had more than one conversation with drone manufacturers that say, only if the Ukrainians would see our drones and buy our drones. And I was like, well, what's the spec on your drone, right? And inevitably, they tell you for over 2-hour Zoom, and you're like, this is never going to work in Ukraine. And so they'd never had the specs. They didn't really know what was going on in Ukraine. And so you knew their drones were going to fail. And so over 2 years, I think I've talked to 600 different people with this same idea, whether they're drone companies or hedge funds that own portfolio companies that are, and I've seen a 0% success rate in Ukraine. And so I was like, something's got to be done. And so earlier this year, I was shooting the breeze with some of the Estonian guys here, the government guys. And I was like, you know what you should do is you should open a sort of a demo test area here in Estonia that kind of looks like Ukraine because the weather is similar and the Russians love spoofing Estonia. So we have all kinds of GPS that puts us in Russia sometimes because they're spoofing it to protect the Moscow from drones. And so we have that. We have weather. And so I was like, we should come up with a way that people could test drones here. And they said, that's a great idea. You should do it. And I'm like, oh, great. And so I was like, let me go to Ukraine. I want to talk to some of people I know in Ukraine. And so I did. And they said, you know what really is needed too is a professional cadre of pilots. AI will be there one day, assisted, what like Helsing and other people are working on, this Saab project that they were doing. It will come one day, but it's not there. And so why don't we teach drone pilots and not only military, right? This is where people get confused. Military, governmental, or commercial, right? To be survivable and to be recoverable. And so what does that mean, right? They get into situations, and this happens quite a bit, whether you're commercial or military, you get into a situation, you lose the drone. So it's not recoverable. And then you're in over your heads and you get into a situation where flying the drone is not survivable. So think of it in terms of crashing into a brick wall. That's not a survivable entity. But is losing one of your props survivable? Not how current drone methodology is taught, but it could be. And so, and I really, I'll tell this great story really quick. I was talking to a Ukrainian guy and he was flying a drone without a camera. And he was, if you looked at the controller, right, I got one here, like he was counting in his head. And then he'd move the stick, he'd move the stick, he'd move the stick. You know what he's doing? He's freaking dead reckoning this thing. It like back, there was not a lot of wind, okay? And like, again, the drone shows up and I was like, how did you do that? And I was like, we need to take a bottle. We need to take these lessons learned and we need to teach it to other people. And so again, just like when you sit in the cockpit of a 737 or A320 or whatever, there's a list, right? And those pilots are trained for years to be survivable and recoverable. And so, and again, if I'm confident if my pilot is trained at a commercial school in United States, my United pilot, but I'm over the moon if he has military training. And so I think we really wanted to take the same spirit into creating this professional cadre. And so what we did is we came up with the Baltic Ghost Wing full name, Center of Excellence. So the Baltic Ghost Wing Center of Excellence, which kind of combines the ability to come and test, because we have like 50 square kilometers. So you can come test, you can have us test for you, and you can do bespoke or, out of the book drone solutions. And like, I think the first couple classes that we're going to do actually are police. They're not even military, flying drones inside. Because if you've seen lately, and I love your posts on this, Dan, too, not only is it, what's the little drone that everybody likes? Teledyne FLIR, the small one that they have, Black Hornet, right? 4, but you can go and fly other drones, Avata being one of them, DJI, or comparable ones. There's a company out of Israel called Extend. They make these as well. Inside, to reduce the casualty rate of police officers. You've seen it in Israel, in Gaza, places like that. Can you imagine? And so we'll be announcing a partnership in that arena as well, and we would welcome police, I guess, as the first guinea pigs. But like we got some outreach from NATO, from search and rescue NGOs, like, hey, can we do battery management for our drones? And so like the thing, Dan, about it is, projects welcome. I think, Volkswagen used to say drivers welcome. If you have really cool projects, please consider, let's come up with a gauntlet. Let's come up with something that we can do together. We also have a water range now, 1,800 square kilometers. And so we would love to be able to like utilize your project. And then the other one is if you really want the conditions of Ukraine and other places, we can't do it all, but we have really great relationships with government entities that we can do it. So that's what we're trying to get across to the community and to make it professional.
Right. Subject matter expertise, real world conditions, and then repeatable training.
Yeah, but I'm just like, think of me as like the general manager. My team is those pilots, those technicians, those engineers. And all I do is I keep a cadre list of these people from all over the world, friendly from all over the world. And if you need X, Y, and Z, we have X, Y, and Z. I got a strange request a couple of weeks ago about flying in swarm drones under canopy for trees. And they do mapping of forest under canopies.
Interesting.
That is the coolest thing I've ever heard of.
For
and
sure.
It has nothing to do with the military.
No, of course.
And so
it's a tricky problem to solve. There's not a lot of GPS in canopies.
There isn't, correct. And so, these wash drones that I started seeing out of United States, I was like, what a cool concept. I just want to put one on the side of our building to wash it. And as people drive by, they say, well, I didn't even know drones could do that.
It's the easiest advertising you could do, James.
Yeah. And like, by the way, we took over this old Soviet airfield, and it's like in the middle, it's like 20 acres, but it's in the middle of this city. And so, if we're flying drones in it and people are driving by, they can see them. And that's the point. That's the point. Let's get them part of your everyday life, because you're going to be seeing a lot more of them, whether we exist or not.
Yeah, totally. All right. That was awesome. James, where can we find you if we want to reach out to you or learn more about what you're working on?
Yeah, absolutely. You guys can go to, or anybody, to balticghostswing.com or balticghostswing.eu. And you can find out all the fun drone things that we're doing.
And you should follow James on LinkedIn. He is excellent, and he has a lot of really timely and poignant takes when it comes to all things autonomous systems.
Thanks for listening to the Drone Wars podcast. Each week, we bring you fascinating conversations with leaders shaping the future of air, sea, land, and space technologies. Catch new episodes every Tuesday wherever podcasts can be found. Until then, we'll see you next time.